Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to Old Man Rambles. Um, the other day, I was doing my morning exercises, had my earbuds in, whatever they're called, um, listening to Cat Stevens, and I was really enjoying the richness of the music. I've always enjoyed his guitar work and the sound of an acoustic guitar. Um, but I was kind of picking up as he was strumming that I could hear his guitar pick hit the strings. There was that small background clicking noise that you hear when someone really strikes the strings hard. There's that little tiny background noise um, that's really only noticeable when you crank the volume up or you've you know listened to it when it's poured right into your ears. And I I really enjoyed it. I really always enjoyed that kind of authenticity in the music, in the sound quality. That the fact that you can hear him playing, you hear his pick striking the strings. And iPod was on shuffle, and it went to the next song, which was another song from the 70s, the same era. And again, I could hear the guitar pick hitting the strings as the artist was playing. And it got me thinking that it got me thinking to an article that I had read about kids of this generation, and the music that they hear, and the fact that it's so digitally processed that they just wash all those little imperfections out. The stuff that they're fed is so clean that when they hear a live performance, they think it's bad. Um, and old man going, kids these days, but I gotta, um, because kids these days will never know what they've lost. Um, they'll never know if they're thinking that live music sounds bad because of those little imperfections. Then they have lost something. Um, it's authenticity. It's what music really sounds like when you don't wash it through a processor or digital synthesizer. And I've got nothing really against you know digitally processing the music. I know, but it depends on what you're doing with it. Frank Zappa was sorry, excuse me, he's a lint or something. Frank Zappa was famous for digitally processing his music, but he didn't do it to clean it. He did it to find out what kind of sounds he could make. He was purposefully creating bizarre sounds, not necessarily scrubbing out his imperfections. Frank Zappa was famously a perfectionist and a harsh taskmaster to the musicians that performed with him. But he wasn't trying to, he was trying to perfect his art, not create a perfect sound. He was trying to create a sound that sounded perfect for what he wanted. Not to erase anything that wasn't marketable, I guess you could say, because that's what a lot of popular music is. Even stuff that's supposed to be authentic. My wife listens to the local country station, which I can't stand, and it's not the music; it's the fact that they repeat. Sorry, going off on a tangent. I hate the local country station because they play the exact same songs over and over and over again, and I despise the repetition. But anyway, I do listen to those songs frequently, um, against my will, and and yeah, these are people. These are country musicians. They're supposed to be, it's supposed to be down home, down to earth kind of people. And there's a lot of guitar work in those songs. And again, I don't hear those little imperfections. It's been washed clean. All those extra sounds that I grew up with, And I've also heard a lot of live music, not necessarily by going to performances, but music's always been a part of my life. You know, there was an upright piano in our house. There was always a guitar in the house. My father, who was not a good musician, but he would try and play. He could pick a couple of songs. My father had harmonica, which he would blow on once in a while. My mother taught herself to play the auto harp. A lot of my parents' friends were musicians. I've always listened to people play music when I wasn't listening to the radio or playing the albums that my parents had. Music was always a huge part of my life, and even live music by people my parents knew who could play was always a big part of my life. And that music wasn't perfected. It was just people hanging out and having a good time. And as an adult, as a young man living in the city of Portland, Maine, Portland, Maine has or at the time I've gotten too old. In my early 20s, Portland had a massive music scene. There were bands playing constantly all over the city. Geno's. My first experience with live punk music was at Geno's, and that's certainly not perfect. But the Tree Cafe, Geno's, all kinds of other little places that I used to go to and hang out would have bands play, and I'd go to see them. And some of them were bands that, who were friends of friends of mine, people that I work with say, hey, this is a guy I know who's in a band, and I'd go and see them play live. And some of them are great. But again, it was live music. It hadn't been scrubbed squeaky clean. Strings would break, and the band would keep playing. There were drummers that, the drummer would miss his cue. These things happen in live performances. And it's part of the experience. It's part of music. And, kids these days will never, I worry that they'll never know that there is real artistry in those imperfections. Good hunting.